Having realised they'd pissed off everyone and ruined Dante, the developers went back to the roots with a prequel.
Why do you refuse to gain power? The power of...
Here Dante is younger, more arrogant, and actually has a character arc. The cutscenes are considerably longer but infinitely better executed through camera style, soundtrack, and much clearer improved writing. I mean, it's still not perfect.
Fear. Yes. Fear.
This party's getting crazy. Let's rock.
But at least in regards to Dante, it suits his character to be throwing cheesy jokes around. There's a lot more humour in this game generally, which might not amuse everyone but makes a refreshing contrast against the foreboding gothic atmosphere and dark central plot. The strength here is that they're not afraid to take the piss out of Dante almost as much as he does to everyone else. I can't think of any other games that include joyriding on missiles, being eaten by giant demon whales, or the lost art of motorbike foo. One area where the writing and voice acting is near perfect in my opinion is the character of the villain Virgil. He completely steals the show as this intensely serious, calm and calculating warrior. The brotherly banter between him and Dante feels really quite down to earth and genuine, until they start stabbing each other, and because of that their violent fighting is all the more meaningful. The character of Lady is also really well developed, as her own story intertwines with Dante's when she seeks vengeance against her father, who is working with Virgil, for the murder of her mother.
And she's dead.
Her conflicts and interactions with Dante are almost as enjoyable to watch as those between him and Virgil.
Well, this is my kind of rain.
She is serious and intense, but also deeply passionate, and as the only completely normal human in the game, she slowly teaches Dante the importance of responsibility, and not being a fun-loving jackass all the time. That, and the fact that she holds her own against these waves of demons by carrying her own body weight in ammo and heavy weapons, is also impressive. Everything is just more thought out here. The story starts off simple and becomes more complex at a comfortable pace. You're engaged and invested without being overloaded.
Is that what you think? Foolish girl.
The entire setting of the Temenigru Tower is dramatic and memorable, a simple idea done effectively. Admittedly, the premise is yet again someone opening a portal to the demon world, but at least it's clear who's doing it this time, and the two power-hungry antagonists are shown to us from the start and quickly established as ruthless killers. Up until about halfway through, Dante doesn't give a shit about the tower or Virgil's plans, he just enjoys killing demons. But later on, this seemingly minor character tricks and defeats all the others, opens the demon world and escapes into it to retrieve Sparta's sword and the demonic power it contains. Now, the tower has doubled in size, a madman is threatening to take over the world, and the previously insurmountable supposed antagonist Virgil has been fooled and defeated. This isn't just raising the stakes, this is breaking Dante's very character and crushing his ego to build him back up stronger. Other games in the series completely miss this by making him an infallible smartass throughout. I'd like to say DMC3 learns from the mistakes of its predecessors, but it kind of just combines them all and hopes for the best. The auto-fire is gone, the magic platforms are back, and the difficulty and speed are returned to challengingly high levels. I don't think 3 is as hard as 1, but it has so many sadistic difficulty settings it probably can be. The combat overall is fast, in-depth, often ridiculous, and most of all, fun. You can easily get obsessed with getting the most style points for varied combos, or upgrading and perfecting all the techniques with every weapon, which they themselves are vastly improved. DMC2 had Merciless, a sword with a longer reach than usual. DMC3 has Nevan, a naked vampire woman who turned into a demonic electric guitar which fires bats, doubles as a sickle, and destroys enemies with the power of rock. Absurd? Obviously yes. Hilarious, awesome fun? Exceedingly good cakes. There's also a more personal element to the combat, with different styles to choose from, and these upgrade through experience and use of them, not with red orbs. It all adds depth, variety and choice in a game where you otherwise just hit things until they die. It's not all crayons and tiddlywinks though, as the troublesome camera returns thrisely. There is thankfully some camera control this time, but it only works in certain areas for some reason, making it still the biggest flaw of the game. There's also a rather cheap game lengthening level towards the end, where you have to refight many of the previous boss battles. It's not great, but it's nowhere near as blatant as DMC2's boss battle pudding, and the fact that you're given a hub area with limited health refills and the choice of what order to fight them in adds a bit more thought into what could easily become a chore. Also, I like the funny sideways stairs. The health bar for enemies is back, but it only has 4 segments and is actually part of the lock-on reticule, so I didn't notice it for like a year. The talking bosses are also back, with each one proving a very different and memorable encounter. The enemies overall are much more varied in DMC3. You've got Grim Reapers, giant spiders, Siamesing demon birds, demonic chess pieces, weird slippery fuckers, floaty jewel knights, fake angels, tentacle face suckers. There's just a lot of different stuff to kill in this game, which helps alleviate repetition. Moving on, the soundtrack stands out much more this time. It's considered and effective, and whilst it's arguable whether the industrial J-metal or whatever you'd call that is good, at least it's appropriate to Dante's attitude and keeps the combat feeling energetic. The other side of the soundtrack, however, with the orchestral choir pieces, is chilling and powerful, and makes the significant plot events much more poignant and resonant. The platforming and puzzle elements return, now more manageable and planned out so the camera rarely has a seizure. There's a lot of backtracking as well, but it rarely becomes tiresome, especially when the tower doubles in size and you travel through the ruins of the previous levels, showing how dauntingly gargantuan the place has become. In an age seemingly infatuated with better graphics lol, I'm reluctant to criticise this grainy effect the game seems to have. It's no masterpiece for a PS2 game with some jaggy edges, blurry textures, and an unsettling mouth design that makes it look like everyone's eating gravel. But I'd much rather have cutscenes like this with the in-game engine than jarring graphical jumps to pre-rendered scenes. So all that aside, I really like the design in DMC3. Everything's kind of dusty, which makes sense for an ancient tower. The Gothic architecture is the right amount of intimidating and dilapidated, and the areas are appropriate whilst being fairly varied and interesting. The character animations are particularly impressive, with everyone down to the regular enemies all moving suitably naturally or unnaturally, which I guess is to be expected when they've gone to the effort of motion capturing actors for the brilliantly choreographed cutscenes. I'm not sure anyone uses the word cinematic in a positive way anymore, but I'm going to attempt to say that about Devil May Cry 3. DMC2 was a half-assed mashed up pile of bollocks and stench, but DMC3 manages to scrub off those stains and start from scratch with a focused plot, challenging but rewarding gameplay, and oh wait, there's a fourth one. Well, I'll start with the positives and say that DMC4 is a pretty stunning looking game. This is clearly where a lot, if not all of the effort went into. Reflections, shadows and sunlight on surfaces all look very real, and there's more detail in the backgrounds, building atmosphere and linking the levels together. The animations are incredibly detailed and smooth, but unlike DMC2 they've achieved this without compromising the game's stylised personality. The only problem here is that they're fully aware of how good their game looks and won't shut up about it. There's excessive cutscenes before every level, in between levels, and even in between fights. There's frequent sweeping camera pans around areas to show off all the design and detail. There's even a fucking zoom button during the cutscenes, which, while a nice gimmick, you shouldn't be so bored you need to start screwing around with the camera. I mean, it's just a pointless feature. Who needs to see the individual pores of sweat on a character? Unless for some other reason. The title screen, which has traditionally been artwork of the main characters, is now a meandering tour around the game's first outside environment. We get it, yes, you look nice, why not let that occur to us naturally, instead of shoving it in our face? If you were a girl with low self-esteem, I could understand it, but you're not. No matter how much I want, as expected, the fixed camera angles return with slightly more control than the previous games, but again, only in certain areas, so it's still not a strong point. As for the environments themselves, it's nice to explore modern, well-maintained cathedrals and castles for a change. There's a good variety of areas, from towns to mountains, jungles and laboratories. It's a wider range than any previous DMC, but for all my praising of backtracking, DMC4 does start to take the piss with this concept, which I'll revisit later. Just when they seemed to be on the right track, this happened. DMC4 bites off considerably more than it can chew by introducing a second protagonist and playable character, Nero, because that worked so well before, and trying to cram a love story, corrupt religious cults, some never explained long lost relative shit, and 2 Dante's worth of swagger all into one game. The basic idea is that this corrupt religious cult that seemingly the whole town follows is summoning and experimenting on demons in order to become more powerful, all the while feigning ignorance to the townspeople about their motives and hiding the fact that their experiments have turned them into demons themselves. Or angels, as they would claim. Once strong enough, they plan to secretly release demons on the town and then publicly kill them to appear almighty saviours and cement the town's loyalty in the religion. Even though, as I said, everyone in this town is either already a part of the religion or fucking crazy about hooded robes, so their loyalty doesn't actually seem to be in question. At least that's what I struggled to make of it. It's more than a little convoluted, which leads into the other problem that I don't give a shit about any of it. It turns out that Nero is almost identical to Dante, except he has this ridiculous short temper that completely undermines all his wisecracks and cool guy attitude. It just makes him look like a smug prick who can't take a joke. Dante, on the other hand, is now one big piss-taker, which seems odd considering the timeline. I guess he mellowed out after getting revenge on Mundus, but then got deadly serious again in time for DMC2? The first half of the game you follow Nero, who is hunting Dante after he shoots his holiness, aka this queasy old twatamarang. The thing is, Nero clearly doesn't give a shit about the Order, and is seemingly only there to hit on the only non-hooded female, Kyrie? The Kool-Aid guy. So Dante starts killing all the church guards, because the Order is also like the police here or something, the leader of which is Credo, Kyrie's brother. When Kyrie sees her brother in potential danger, she tries to run over to him. She gets booped in the face by random guard number 2 and falls to the floor. Dante then terrifies Kyrie with his utter indifference and pisses off Nero for not looking like he's going to murder his girlfriend. One stupid forced excuse for a fight scene later and Dante fucks off. Credo says go find him, demons enter stage right, and Kyrie leaves with her brother for a good quarter of the game. Just to clarify, the only thing that Nero cares about is now out of the story. Good luck creating tension now. Not that Kyrie is anything more than a cliched one-dimensional near-mute love interest and hostage anyway. That's right, as soon as she's back in the story, she's made a hostage. Wait, scratch that. They tried to turn her against Nero for about 5 seconds just before that. Then she's made a hostage. Then she goes all limp for some reason, and this stuttering shit minister takes her away. Confused? Don't be alarmed, that indicates only that you are still sane. They try to make this romance a central part of the plot, but Kyrie has so little personality and Nero is such a bro around her, it's not really enjoyable to watch or particularly gripping. The previous games only hinted at romantic subplots, with the previously mentioned Freudian weirdness between Dante and Trish in 1, or this moment from DMC3 where the legendary son of Sparta gets friend-zoned. What I'm saying is that a full-on romance storyline is difficult to pull off, and you don't do yourself any favours by making one of the couple a douche with temper tantrums and the other a post-lobotomy damsel in distress. So the writing, it's not great. It builds this convoluted story and then struggles to actually tell it in between all its showing off and increasingly bad quips. The dialogue has half-decent moments, but by halfway we've got lines like this.
Well, if the kid screws up, then I'll just have to kick his ass.
Overall, the story just isn't as dark as previous installments, which sheds a harsh light on Dante and Nero's posturing. When Dante does stupid quips in front of some demonic monstrosity, it somehow works because he's laughing in the face of real danger. Here, it feels more like he's cleaning up. Something else that doesn't sit well is the increased sexualization of females in DMC4. All of them besides Kyrie are flirty, bouncy, and presumably fucking freezing. Trish returns from DMC1 to help Dante out by dressing up as Lady Gaga and infiltrating the Order in a completely inconspicuous outfit. She also seems to rip an entire layer of different coloured skin off at one point. Yuck. But she doesn't act like the Trish we know from DMC1, instead she struts around like a hooker with her oversized ego on display, whilst even Lady is turned into someone in desperate need of new coat buttons. This is meant to be the same girl from DMC3, by the way, the one who fought her way through legions of demons and killed her own father, the walking gun emporium seething with hatred and grief. Yeah, that's her apparently. Now reduced to a fan service appearance, Tits McGee for the newcomers, and a big dump of expositional dialogue, most of which we already knew for anyone sorry enough to be trying to follow the story. The exploitation in this game is so obvious, patronising and money-grabbing that every wank from it is pretty much shame-free in comparison. Now maybe you're thinking, fuck the story, I just want to shoot things, and normally that's a durable opinion, but there is so much story here, and the game is so desperate for you to see it, pressing start a few times ain't gonna cut it. Let's start from the beginning, shall we? There are 2 consecutive opening cutscenes lasting a total of 9 minutes before you reach gameplay. You can choose to have no tutorials beforehand, but DMC4 knows you hit that option by mistake, so tutorials regardless. You have no health bar or ability to fail, immediately crushing all the tension the lengthy preceding cutscene built up for this grand battle between Dante and Nero. The game tells you how to move, shoot, jump and dodge, and you have to prove you can do it too, or you're not allowed to move on. Jump through these hoops and you get another cutscene, followed by another tutorial on basic sword attacks. Then another cutscene introducing Nero's Devilbringer arm, and naturally a tutorial on how to use that. If you haven't done a gun attack through your own skull at this point, you're allowed to play the game and fight Dante, which whilst fun gameplay-wise, wasn't the side I was rooting for. You damage him enough until another cutscene triggers, and that's the first level. Over 10 minutes of cutscenes, excessive tutorials, and a brief boss battle against someone I didn't even want to fight. Not exactly gripping my controller with anticipation here. So level 2 starts with some cutscenes of course, and you eventually get to fight in the highly anticipated Pathway with Water Fountain. The combat is very similar to DMC3, so actually good for the most part. Nero's unique features being the Devilbringer arm, which allows you to get closer to enemies quickly without having to abuse the charge attacks. It also allows for some pretty brutal attacks of its own, where, if you can drop an enemy's guard, you can throw them into the ground, stab them with their own lances, or just beat the living crap out of them. It can make you feel like quite the badass until you realise it was all automatic and you only had to press one button. Nero's other feature is that he's somehow fitted a bike engine or something into his sword, so he can rev it up for more powerful attacks. It makes no fucking sense, but it's a cool enough gimmick and it adds a bit more depth to the combat. As for Dante, he's carried over most of his abilities from DMC3, although this time you have the 4 main fighting styles interchangeable at any time through the D-pad, which is a nice way of making old favourites fresh again. Or saving time and money by reusing game mechanics. Depends how you look at it. As well as this, unlike Nero, Dante acquires new weapons throughout the game, upon beating each demonic boss. Some of these are better than others. The Gilgamesh gauntlets, for example, are just a complete copy of DMC3's Beowulf gloves. The Pandora's box, however, is a hilariously over-the-top gun that has 666 different forms of death dealing. Obviously you can't access them all, but having a machine gun, bazooka, laser cannon, frisbee blade and missile launching death mech sphere all in one magic briefcase is undeniably cool. Any game that can make me feel like a psychopathic Inspector Gadget deserves some credit. Then there's Lucifer, a kind of explosive spear-throwing suit that upon retrieval triggers such an impromptu innuendo-laden performance from Dante that is just so stupid it might actually work. I'm too jaded from backtracking to really tell at this point. And there is a lot of backtracking in DMC4. Halfway through the game you switch character to Dante because Nero's being digested. Thankfully the game trusts you enough at this point not to force tutorials down your throat, but Dante's campaign does basically then consist of going through all of Nero's levels backwards, undoing everything you just did, and needless to say that gets a bit repetitive. It might have just been bearable if they hadn't resorted to cheap level lengthening tricks like trial and error mazes or swallowing monsters that teleport you to a room full of enemies every time. You might remember DMC1 pulled the same shit with one of its bosses. The difference there was that by beating the trap area, you took a massive chunk out of the boss's health. But here they're just regular enemies and you get nothing for escaping. You can just get caught again and again and again and stuck in an endless loop of not fun. The enemies this time include drunken chubby versions of DMC1's marionettes, the icy spike lizards also from DMC1, these possessed suits of armour, liquid metal sharks, Ghost Rider dogs, the same armoured needle gun lizards from DMC1 and 2, and spiky lightning demons. If they'd reused one more enemy from a previous game I could moan at them for that too, but they might just about get away with it. Although these are pretty fucking similar, don't you think? The demonic bosses are still pretty memorable, but unfortunately there's only 3 of them, until you're fighting significant plot characters again who simply aren't as fun as centaur fire giants or ice toads with lesbian antennae. There's also a ridiculous knockback on both Nero and Dante, so if you're caught in a string of hits you'll need to get a bus back to where the fight was. Another piss-taking feature is a board game room you reach as Nero, where you have to hit a giant spiked die with your sword and progress across the board, collecting orbs on blue circles and fighting enemies on red ones, that kind of stuff. You could call it slicing and dicing! Until eventually you reach the other side and unlock the door. I shouldn't even have to say it at this point, it's cheap cop-out game lengthening. But when you come to the same room as Dante, he just cuts the dice in half, because, Dante don't give a fuck. And it's like a knowing smile from the developers saying, yeah, we know the dice from shit, we won't make you do that again. Except then, when you regain control of Nero on the penultimate level, they make you do it again. There's even like 5 repetitions of it, and in between each one they make you refight the bosses. Fuck it! So in conclusion, Devil May Cry needs to be fast and challenging to make the combat tense and exciting. DMC can be serious but never realistic. The story is best kept simple. The voice acting is best kept concise. The darker the storyline, the less of a twat Dante seems somehow. Learn from your mistakes, and don't treat the players like idiots. So the Devil May Cry games rank in order of not shitness 3, 1, 4, 2. Wait a minute. Well, that's weird. There's probably some deeper meaning behind that, but I can't give a fuck anymore. Time's up, show's over. Thanks for watching. Go smoke a goat.